Welcome, everyone, to another Lectern. This is number 3 in the series with my dear friend and co-worker, Ethan Hsieh. We've done a lot of work around his developing educational, deductive ecology of practices, TIAMAT. Ethan and I have been working together for quite some time in general. And I've been helping him where I can, and so has Taylor Barratt and Christopher Masterpietro and Ryan Barton and Rick Rapetti. We've all been helping, and I'm also I'm officially helping Ethan with his PhD project. And so what we're talking about, the whole running theme is how Ethan has been taking my work and the work of Jung and the work he learned from various performance theorists and general principles of aesthetics that he's picked up, and how to turn it into a fully embodied, enacted, embedded, and extended with other people ecology of practices to bring about a progressive pedagogical platform of scaffolding transformation. And today we're going to talk more about that. We're going to talk more about how the ultimate orientation of this, which is the cultivation of that virtuosity into a responsibility to virtue and an orientation to virtue. And then possibly the relationship between the virtue and the orientation and the sense presence of the sacred. And so welcome, Ethan. It's good to be with you again.
Always. I see you always very often, and this is a special context. I think I've recently been considering this idea of what it is to recover the virtue of being in the world, and what that necessarily means. And I think this picks up from our last conversation where Ellie had beautifully left off the question of, hey, how does an ecology of practices, TIAMAT or otherwise, transfer into daily life and ultimately an orientation towards the sacred, and I think you put it well, the responsibility to virtue. And I think I find myself in a more tender place today. Part of me wants to take this really slowly and very carefully, because I'm always concerned about the extent to which the power of spiritual exercise can thin the line that we need to walk as facilitators or as practitioners in alignment with virtue and ultimately wisdom, meaning in life, the sacred.
I think that's right. I mean, the razor's edge, the narrow path, these are archetypal metaphors for an orientation to deep virtue. The Neoplatonists had a series of virtues. They had civic virtue, which is by and large what we have left in our everyday discourse about ethics, how we should treat each other in civil society. And they thought of this as the first tier. This is basically where you get your agency in order. And then you had purification virtues. These are virtues where you're basically getting your selfhood in proper order, ordered to what is most real. And then you have the illumination virtues, like ultimately theosis, that are about getting your personhood into right order. And I think for a lot of people, they are hungry in ways they do not know. First of all, because the civic ethics is all they have left, and therefore they're missing a lot of this. And so they go looking for other things, often not that well designed, and certainly often not designed with their best interest at heart. And then secondly, even at the civic level, they're largely pursuing it in terms of rules to be followed, as opposed to all the non-propositional elements. So one of the things I'd like to talk about, there's two, is this. And I'm wondering if this has any relationship to the tiers, Tiamat, the way I just described it, the civic around agency, right? The purification around selfhood, which deals largely with, issues around how you are properly apprehending your selfhood, right? And then a personhood, which is basically that part of you that dwells in normativity and is oriented towards what's ultimate. The way in a sort of correspondence with how your agency is grounded in what is most primordial. So there's a lot of exercises that are grounding people's agencies, reshaping their selfhood, and opening up and reorienting their personhood. And then the second thing, which I think weaves through that, something I've been exploring, is one of the ways in which we can understand how practices transfer, this is all the work I've done on ritual, is by understanding them, and this of course comes from Vervaeke and others, understanding ways of knowing that are only accessible in these practices, that we're knowing reality in ways that we otherwise can't know. And then realizing how much that knowing is pervasive and profound in our everyday life. So the two theses I want to explore are sort of the levels of the virtues. How does that interact? And also practice as ritual, meaning ritual as cognition, ways of knowing the world that are otherwise inaccessible except through the practice. So those are the two proposals, two framing proposals.
I love that. I think there's something I can touch on the first sort of piece, like how it maps onto the tiers. And in the initial first conversation that we talked about tier one, just refresh them, right? So tier one is awakening to structures. And I think that there's a way in which that grounds the knowing.
Yes.
As you're talking about it, right? We have to have a framework in which we can sort of hang things on, but also like draws us into participation into the world rather than leave us in combinatorily explosive abstract space.
Right.
Which is just about explanation, but no participation. And then I think what tier two does, and this was, explicated very lovely in a lovely way by Renz and Ellie in the last conversation, is there's a very strong focus on being there, right? So this sense of, hey, everything that is occurring for you, whether in a social situation, right, or in a political situation, or the way in which you take something, is not only causally related to the one stimulus that's more salient for you in the moment.
Sure.
It's interacting with all of the history, everything that someone brings to. And where I go to in tier three, and which is so tier two is anagoge through dynamic.
Right.
So understanding being with somebody, what's in the way of that, and how you create that sort of upward spiral. And then tier three is what we call alchemy of states. And I think that points to exactly what we're talking about, with ways of knowing that are only possible in ritual. So this is altered states of consciousness. And I want this to be heard the right way. Altered states of consciousness doesn't just mean that, I've dropped DMT and now I see space goblins. There's a high level version of that. But we experience altered states of consciousness every day.
Yes.
Right. Whether it's a kind of dissociation or it's heightened affect, right? Or we are shifting in these states in a more subtle way. And we might not consider that, but it is. And I think there's good reason why that is. Because it means that they are far more accessible. They're not gatekept behind a particular kind of substance I need to take, or I need to drive myself to the extent of physical assertion. Those are helpful for getting to places, but also to recognize the more subtle ways in which that shows up. And I think when that's folded in, the profanity in the sense that it is quotidian, there is an everydayness to it. The alchemy of those states is part of realizing that, hey, when I'm upset and everything seems to set me off, or when I'm like really, really happy and I see my beloved and the world opens up in a particular way, that's also an altered state of consciousness. How do those talk together? How do those feed together? And then that becomes the valuing piece. what do I care about that is the coherent through line in all? And I think that's where ultimacy shows itself, or one can be in relationship with that. And for me, at least, I've been toying around with a few sort of just reframes for a number of years, and particularly in relation to the sacred. Is I think there is a way in which one is trapped, or at least in our modern culture, we're trapped in the what and why. What is the sacred? Why does it exist? And I always found that odd. I think the question for me is much more how and when. So the argument that I put forward is, if the sacred is, and this is borrowing from Nishitani, right? So if the sacred is omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, everywhere, all powerful, all knowing, then if I am with its absence, or if I feel distant from the sacred, or I feel distant from reality, from the ground of being, I need to shift. And that shift is, how is this sacred now? Where is the sacred now that I'm not necessarily seeing or being with?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that opens up the question of not being fitted. So now I can move. I can turn. And there's an agency there. There's agency to be found in that place. But it's not because the sacred is not there, it's gone. It only shows up at certain special moments. It's here. Always, 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 always. Ground of relationship, always there. So that's my initial sort of proposal. I'm wondering how that lands with you.
It lands well. So some things that come out for me is, I think there's a shift going on. It's in my thinking, and it's in a lot of the thinking of the people I'm reading and resonating with. For example, Wynne and others, Desmond, that we should be thinking of the sacred adverbally rather than adjectively, which is exactly moving from the what. What is it? What's its color? What's its shape? What kind of thing is it? To the how, like how is it showing up? How am I oriented to it, connected to it? So there, and I think part of that shift is consonant with the shift from being fascinated, almost fetishizing of substances and things, and shifting instead to relations as much more constitutive of the nature of reality, information, intelligibility, etc. Causation. Those are all relational entities, right? And so I hear that. I saw in the way you described it very much something that seems analogous to, the civic virtues getting plugged into, and then I liked the way the next is very much purification. You're doing the anagogic stuff, and then the altered states of consciousness is obviously orienting towards illumination. So you've sort of recovered the classic scheme, which is good convergence. I think there's a reason why that scheme shows up, and of course, it was taken over into Christianity in a major way. The notion there, it's like I'm doing a lot of work because I'm prepping for a course on like the primordial, that which grounds us, and the ultimate, that which encompasses us. These are sort of, I'm trying to go very carefully, and I'm doing it very carefully with you through the phenomenology. Remember, phenomenology doesn't mean just introspection. It means trying to pick up the invariant structures that are making experience intelligible to you. And I've been noticing, both in the reading, my practice, other people, sacred text, that there's these two. There's the grounding from primordiality. Prototypical, that's something like the Tao. Right? That's something like the Tao, right? And then there's the encompassing of ultimacy. And prototypically, that's something like the one, the Neoplatonic one. It encompasses. It's that which encompasses and enlivens the living community of the true, the good, the beautiful, and the intelligible. Whereas this one is the primordial, it's the phusis, it's that from which everything springs up. And so this is the non-propositional that is deeper than us, and this is the non-propositional that's higher than us. And so I've been thinking about this as, the beautiful is the way the intelligibility plugs us into realness. And then the good is that which, right, binds the beautiful of the primordial, right, to the really real of the true. And so this is the primacy of beauty, the centrality of goodness, and the ultimacy of truth that Schindler talks about. And I noticed that different traditions, this goes like to the lecture I gave yesterday that you were present at, how different traditions, like some tradition, like Taoism, really foregrounds the primordiality and the uncarved block, right? Whereas, the Platonic tradition really emphasizes ultimacy and that which encompasses and gives a normative, and it gives birth to a normative structuring for everything, the good, right? And then, right, and then the idea that being is somehow that which holds those two together, and that the sacred, and of course I'm doing the world tree here. We're, like Elizabeth likes to say, we're rooted, we have deep roots, we have broad branches, and what she always leaves implicit, but should be there, is we have a living trunk.
A thick trunk.
Yeah. The world tree, which I have, one of my favorite symbols. And it seems to me, I'm almost done, it seems to me that the way you're talking about it, it's like, first of all, people are getting very rooted, and then they're getting the sap flowing, and it's starting to do this.
I like that. Yeah.
And then they're branching into, right, ultimacy, the way people do when they're in dialectic to dialogos, and they start to realize the expansiveness of a virtue. How does that land for you?
Fantastically. I mean, so there are so many threads that I could pick up there. My gosh, right? So maybe I'll start with this, right? You talked about the phenomenology of it, and that always interests me. What does it feel like when you're really rooted, the sap is flowing, and your branches are spreading?
Yeah.
Right. Like, and there's like, even just think about it, right? Like that's already a very poetic image, and there's an archetypal image. I talk about trees quite a lot in Tiamat.
And they show up in both Taoism and in Christianity, right? Like there are, very much.
There's Yggdrasil. Okay. So here's something really interesting that we do in Tier 3, which almost sounds sort of counterintuitive, right? But there's a way in which I've always held the position that performance is a kind of controlled dissociation, and that's something that I borrow strongly from that particular tradition, because I think that that's necessary for spiritual exercise, because it offers us an opportunity as individuals to decenter from our egocentric needs, wants, desires, etc.
These are pivotal mental states. You have to go into epistemic vulnerability if you want broad, deep, and quick learning.
Exactly, right. And how one encounters themselves and other people in that epistemic vulnerable state is necessary. I'm convinced of this, deeply necessary for finding new affordances. Oh, I had no idea that I could be this way with somebody else.
I see.
I had no idea that I could see the world in this way, right? And we have elaborate, like in Tier 3, long, like 2-hour long, 3-hour long rituals, which we do on a daily basis. And they are big group exercises that are they don't have a particular person like me saying this is correct or this is not, right? In that sense, it's not a purity code. In fact, the great Russian acting teacher who is now just coming back into the forefront, Nikolai Demidov, says very famously, everything is correct. Take your time. Everything is correct. And there's something very profound in that, which is, I think he's calling to the unfolding of your being, ultimate, and that's built into his pedagogy. So if you're in a state of epistemic vulnerability and things are rapidly complexifying, I think the phenomenology is necessarily one of confusion and surprise. But we pointed this out, you pointed this out the last time we talked, which is the difference between I call it the ambiguity of the good. Then the ambiguity of the good is necessarily more and more intelligible, more real, because it's complexifying.
That's right.
And that makes so much sense. Like, to me, when you said, I think you said it in one of the lectures, that intelligibility's normative standard is actually not generalizability, is complexification.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the more that one encounters the really real, the less I know about it. And certainty starts to fall away. That's the confusion. Right? But it's being able to stay in that confusion and to go, okay, actually what's here?
What
How many? It calls to, and it's a space of not knowing because there is more to be known, and it's just like expanding that search space.
So what you're doing with your hands, now people perhaps have a better understanding of the cloud of unknowing. Cloud is inherently ambiguous. It's constantly shifting, and it's doing exactly what you're talking about. That's what the anonymous author of that text was trying to get you to see. And it's not the same as a mere privation of understanding. It's not the same at all.
Yes.
Inaris makes a big point about this. Sorry, I'll just finish the point. Inaris makes a big point.
Please go ahead.
About the West has tended to reduce this to negative theology, which is just negation. And he says, no. The East, meaning the Greek East, not the Asiatic East, the Greek East was able to keep apophasis as the sense of what we're talking about here. Unending ecstasis, complexification, into unending inexhaustibility, which is a very different thing, very different thing.
I want to add to that. I think there is a poetic dimension to that is absolutely key.
How so?
Because in one of the main rituals that we do in Tier 3 is called the courtyard, and we had talked about this before, where one person emergently becomes an oracle.
Yes.
And so they are thrown into a kind of controlled dissociation that's held by the rest of the group. And what they're doing is they're picking up on environmental cues, right? Things that are happening inside them, associations that they're making, and we encourage that. And what emerges from that discovery or that exploration has a kind of poetic dimension to it. I remember when we were doing our Tier 3 in Bali with the aspirant group, Ellie was our first oracle. And she was talking about this magical squelch, right, which is the sound that her feet were making when they were pressing into the mud. Yeah. And she was saying, there is a squelch here. Can you squelch? I can squelch. There's this. Hear the squelch. Right? And the squelch can carry into like boats. We were on the side of like a hillside overlooking the ocean. And there was a moment where we were all sort of like looking at the boat she had taken us to the edge of the rice field. And we're standing there and we sort of feel the squelch of the ocean with the mud, right? And then what we do is that we go into a kind of parts work process. So it's a multi-perspectival process where each person in the group, right, is looking at it from a different Jungian function, for lack of a better term, right? But that's how I do
thinking, feeling, things like that.
Yeah, thinking, feeling, intuiting, sensing. And in that is a kind of constellation. But the constellation is not a reduction. It doesn't go, oh, so the squelch is basically just your tacit, implicit pattern recognition of your embedded environment, which is connecting to nature. No. There is something deeply personal about it that is revealed because there is a poeticism that allows us to key into that and to see in it. And in that is the rapid complexification of what it means. But it's non-propositional.
Right.
I feel this is why I struggle, because there's a part of me that feels like I want to break it down into its conceptual framework, but knowing how futile that is. And I'm not trying to invoke magical thinking here.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm trying to point at is that when we encounter complexification, it naturally calls the non-propositional.
Oh, very much. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think there's a way around that. I think that's a feature, not a bug.
Well, let's just give people a really clear touchstone. The moment of when you have a moment of clear, like and plausibly correct insight. Think about what happens. Everything was disconnected. How does this go together? What am I supposed to do? And you get that insight, right? That's complexification. And there's an emergence, and you get the sense of presence and the sense of connectedness and the flash. And I asked you, well, can you put it into words and lay out the inferential pattern? Well, there is none. There is none there, because what you've done is you've opened yourself up to participate in a self-organizing process. What you did is you made yourself properly prone by building a good set of constraints, enabling and selective constraints, so it will channel into the problem. And so I'm asking everybody, what's Ethan talking about? Try to think about when you had a very powerful insight. Now let's take it one notch further. You've probably had at least one or two of these kinds of insights that wasn't just into this problem. You had an insight. Now I'm doing Iris Murdoch, where you go, oh, I've been here before. I've done this. I've made this kind of mistake. Oh, and you're not just getting an insight into this situation. You're getting an insight back into the problematic within, and you start opening up, and you can get a huge, this is metanoia, you can get a huge change. And notice again how non-propositional that is, and how so much of it is carried by affect and perspective and narrative and redistribution of salience. So if you can recall an insight, and then if you can recall one of those more profound insights, you get a deeper sense of the kind of thing Ethan is trying to point us towards. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, I'll try and paraphrase that, and hopefully also exemplify the non-reductionist stance that I'm taking, which is that when this kind of insight occurs, a proper systemic one, which I think is what you're pointing towards, right? Then it isn't just that I understand something differently or I get it.
Yeah.
It's not about getting anything.
That's right.
It's that, the world appears different to me, and I can be a different way.
Yes.
And being a different way is incredibly powerful. Like, because of that, because of, say, that particular instance of that ritual, I don't walk through the forest the same way again. And we've been through, we live in the tropics, right? So there's mud everywhere. But I also don't see the sea the same way again. It has a profoundly different meaning to me.
Yeah.
I don't see my partner the same way again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's properly transformative.
Yeah, this is the mountain. Before I was doing Zen, mountains were mountains and rivers were rivers. While I was doing Zen, and there's the dissociation, mountains weren't mountains and rivers weren't rivers. When I was done doing Zen, mountains were mountains and rivers were rivers. And often they'll capitalize the second because they're trying to convey a sensed presence, a significant deepening, maybe even a presencing of a sensed presence that's, you can't, it's adverbial. There's no what. You can't say, well, the trees used to be brown and now they're black. It's not like that. It's adverbial. It's the how, not the what of things is fundamentally different.
John, on the back of this, right? You want to continue, but I wanted to make sure that I just throw this question in there, which is, how do you see this connecting into the notion of being in the world, like hyphenated being in the world?
So let me just, a quick clarification. Are you alluding to that in like in the Heideggerian sense, being in the world?
Yes.
Okay. So this is, properly Dasein. This is the idea. Heidegger's, just to give a quick set context, Heidegger's trying to break out of the Cartesian straitjacket. He's trying to break out of the subject-object dichotomy. And I've been reinforcing that with trying to break out of all the dichotomies, the fact-value dichotomy and all that, the is-ought. Because what you actually have is you are being in the world. You have this, phenomenologically, there's a one. It's not a homogeneous one of a thing. It is the flowing one of a how. It's how you are. You are, right? Your being and the world's being are interwoven. You see, as soon as I try to talk about it, I'm separating it out, right? Right.
Yeah.
And so that's being in the world. And what Heidegger was trying to do with his sometimes tortured neologisms was to get us out of this Cartesian grammar so we could return to the primordiality, and I mean that, of what our phenomenology is actually like, not how we picture it being, right? But how it actually is present to us when we aren't projecting a picture onto it. And then you get, this is being in the world. But for me, the being in the world is exactly the trunk. That's right. Being is the connection, the religio of primordiality and ultimacy. It's ultimacy and it's the emanation and the emergence. It's the interpenetration of them. And so for me, the way to understand being in the world is there's the Heideggerian part, which is, yes, we have to break down this dichotomy, but we also have to break down this dichotomy. And then, and this is what Plotinus meant when it's a sphere, you break down the dichotomy between this, and then you have being in the world. And that's the good. That's the ontonormativity. That is the fundamental good. This is the ultimate, the true. This is the beautiful grounding, the primordial that gives birth to us like a mother, right? Matter, right? And then this is, like we said, this is the flowing sap. This is that which makes every specific good in our life possible. It is being in the world. It is the intelligible interweaving of relevance realization and reality realization. It is ontonormativity. It's good not because it's ethically good or aesthetically pleasing or epistemically good. What is behind it is it's just good because it is that which makes all of those possible. That's why I like to talk about, right, what's actually flowing between the true, the good, and the beautiful, the intelligible. But what's the intelligible? Well, the intelligible is being held between the deepest of the enabling constraints and the most powerful of the selective constraints. So I've answered it in 5 different ways.
As you do. Wait, Richard, and this is one of those things which I want to point out. Like the more that you try to explicate it, you are doing the exemplification of like, this is not going to ever be enough.
Yeah, no. And that's apophaticism. That's what Yanaris means. When you go, this is never going to be enough, and you're not in a state of privation in which things have been negated and removed. You are in a state of superabundance.
And I want to name an anecdote. Well, it's an experience of one of the aspirants. We did an interview, and we do these interviews after containers to just have participants talk to each other. I'm not there, so they can speak freely. Neither am I throwing questions or whatsoever, right? And I get to watch it afterwards. And this is from Nas. Nas is he's a beautiful, beautiful human being. I've grown to love him a lot. And I think you've met him as well. Where so he's a lecturer in computational science, and he does a lot of work on predictive processing. Yeah. And one of the things he said in this interview, which we've made public, so I can share, is for a long time there's a way in which he's heard that the logical part of him, the part that likes to figure things out and find causal relations between the parts that's the sciencey part of it, right, is not human. And what he had found in doing the practices is a kind of acceptance that, no, this part of me that is logical, that wants to pursue ideas and concepts, they are also a part of me, and therefore they are human. What does it mean that it's not human? I'm almost quoting him verbatim here, because I think it's so powerful, especially for a computational scientist, to say that. Mm-hmm. And I say this because I don't want us to demonize the logical process. I don't want to demonize that and say that, what I've heard in a variety of other kinds of like workshops, I suppose, is or leave your brain at the door, or don't think about it too much.
No, that's decadent Zen. That's decadent Zen. That's the part. That's why Zen needs to be in opponent processing with Neoplatonism. When there's an importance to getting to the primordial pre-logical, and that's what Zen is doing because it's so deeply influenced by Taoism. But there's an importance to going to the supralogical, right, which takes us into ultimacy, and that's what Neoplatonism does. And those two balance each other off so you can properly proportion, ratio, your attitude and your attention to the logical, right? It's I think I've been pretty consistent. I refuse any framework. This is one of my heuristics, but it's a maxim. Any framework that demonizes or deifies any particular faculty, I reject it right off the bat. You go with your heart. Your intellect is your problem. No, go with your intellect. Your heart. No, sorry. No, that's first of all, that's dehumanizing. It's idolatrous, and it presupposes a model of cognition that is plausibly and probably false, and yet I see it as a cross-cultural parasitic process. Yeah. I've got to, I may not be my into it, like, and people, and no, you've got to, it's like, nope. I'm a little bit worried at times about Ian McGilchrist, that he's starting to deify the right hemisphere. And the research that he talks about really, and this is what I keep saying, I've said it to Ian's face, so this is not me talking behind his back. Insight isn't in the right hemisphere. It's metaxu between the left and the right hemisphere. And it's also not just left and right. It's front and back. It's top and bottom. I'm worried about the deification. I'm worried when people start to deify. I'm also worried when people, and they're almost always together. Like the deification, for example, of the right hemisphere, there's a demonization of the left hemisphere that can happen. I don't know if Ian's doing that. I'm worried that he could be taken to be doing that. And I know a lot of people who follow him do that. And I find that very worrying. I understand why we have to overcompensate because we have neglected the right and deified the left. And so there's a needed corrective overcompensation, but I'm worried that it's shifting into deification, a counterbalanced, off balance, I should say, deification and demonization. And so, like, there's something. I mean, we want to do this, and I'm just wondering. So this is from Charles, based on some work from both Frankfurt and Charles Taylor. They have the idea that one of the functions of the ego is to identify and disidentify. So that what the ego does is it endorses this and says, I'm that, and it rejects this and says, I'm not that.
Yeah.
And I'm
identity and difference.
Yeah. And I think I'm wondering if that's the initial engine of deification and demonization. Sorry, I said a lot there, but that there was a lot there to unpack.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to pick out here. I think what we're circling around is, when we say recovering the virtue of being in the world, I think is fundamentally this idea of how do we recover the virtue of the good.
Yes.
And so there are a couple of things to point out here. First of all, the ego piece. I mean, I named this in my tier 1 opening lecture, right? That the ego has a filtration function of identification and difference.
Yeah.
And that necessarily forms the ground of our autobiographical narrative, the story of your life, right? And that has a gravitational center, which is why egocentrism is actually necessary, because otherwise we fall apart, right? Now, if you want to hear more about that lecture, there's resources and come for a workshop, and I'm happy to give it because it's a very fun lecture to give. But there is also something here which I think is really, really fascinating. So, the question is not one of I think it is. So sorry. Let me slow down. Right. I think you're right. I think the ego is the primordial kind of mechanic for the deification, demonization piece, if taken out of proportion.
Yes, exactly.
And I think this is the what you're pointing at with Ian is not so much. I don't think it's a question of what he is doing or isn't doing, because we have to be in relationship with him to discover the intent, right? At least how he intends it.
Well,
but there is what the context of our culture does is to necessitate a particular emphasis.
Mm-hmm.
And with the necessary emphasis comes the over-indexing on that. Probably because, and I take Ian in good faith, as I think he looks at it and goes, well, this is what we need. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that there's all that there is, right? So even when I'm facilitating, I find myself in a precarious position, because if someone is explicitly too logical and propositional and falling too much of the abstract, I find it my job, my pedagogical responsibility to go, hey, are you considering your gut?
Right.
Hey, how are you feeling about this? And I'm not trying to pigeonhole the person or corner them or shift goalposts on them, but there is a necessary evil, quote unquote, right, of being a pedagogue to say, hey, look at this area that you're not considering, right, in order to bring them into alignment. And this scales out because, for me, one of my big concerns with TIAMAT, and I constantly tackle this question, is it a cult? And I think that's a necessary question.
No,
because I don't want to be a cult leader. There's too much of that around, and there is a particular historical precedent in, like, say, performance training, which lends itself to those kinds of dynamics. So I often tell people 3 things. 1, I try and do good problem formulation as transparently as I can.
Yes.
2, open to self-correction, which is why exercises constantly shift and change and become better and reiterated. Right.
Living tradition
with people like yourself.
Yeah, just to pin on that. Don't lose your flow. I was always telling people to look for a living tradition rather than a veneration of the leader. Is the lead is the tradition? Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, you're keying into the third point, which is an absence of dependency.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So people can come, they attend a workshop, go away. Go live your life. Go be a dad. Go raise your family. Go run your school. Go, be a nurse, right? Like, go out into the world, go be back in the world to do that. Because one of the things which I think key into the deification is people coming to a workshop or a practice out of desperation. I need this. Otherwise, I can't function in my life, right? And then that very quickly flips over into, I hate this, it was terrible, etc., etc., etc. And then the dialogue is lost. So when we talk about recovering the virtue of being in the world, how do you see that play out in dynamics within a particular practice context? And how do you see that showing up in the world? Like coming back to the phenomenology, what would you say to people who are looking for a tradition, and how to perhaps identify whether or not the orientation is healthy before you even go in? Or is that possible at all?
It's very hard to know it from the outside because this is L.A. Paul's problem of transformative experience. You don't know who you're going to be and what it's going to be like until you're inside and doing the practice. So, the heuristics you pointed to, I think, are excellent heuristics. Again, what is the focus? I used to say, like, what's the focus? Is the focus the teaching or the teacher? Is there evidence that there has been correction, a living tradition? The leader, I used to do that, but I realized it wasn't helping people, and I do that. Or is there instead the suppression of correction? No, do it this way because I am the master and you must do what I say. And then again, is there the affordance of independence, or is there the creation of dependency? You must, more and more be near me, more and more and more, or you shouldn't need me anymore. You should be going out and doing stuff in the world, kind of thing. So I think, it doesn't surprise me. We were saying very, very similar. This is when I was teaching the meditation classes, and I was very similar. So I think those heuristics are good heuristics. I tend to add a few more now. One of the things that can help is to see the degree to which the person who is the generative teacher of the group is being responsible to history and to science. Right. If they're just armchairing it autodidactically, that's a flag. Be careful, right? That's a flag. If they're saying, right, and if they say, I'm citing this and I'm citing, and then you have to be careful because people will often cite things that you can't catch them on. Well, quantum mechanics backs my, it's like, what? No. So, right, it has to be that they have to try and make a case for how this is responsible. They don't have to be scientists, obviously, but they have to care about being consistent with the best science, being consistent with history. If they start creating fictional histories, which cults always do, one of the clear senses you are in a cult is a fictional history of your culture or your city or whatever starts to be generated, and you have to take on that fictional history. That's another thing to look for. Also, the degree to which the community is embedded in a network of other communities. Or is it self-isolating? Does it try to interact with other communities doing different things and welcome that? So those are a few of the extra ones I add. And that we, in the Lectern, we're trying to live all of those out. And then the last one, which is last because you should only consider it after you've done all these other ones that have a more objective aspect to them. Would you consider this person a role model for other people? Like, And you may say, well, doesn't every cult think? No. What I mean is, with like some people that you really love, do you have clear ideas that could be put into practice on how what this person is teaching could be helpful to them? Not what the leader says is helpful, but do you? Because the leader will actually try to get you, if they're cult, they'll try to get you to draw people in, right? And I'm saying, so what I'm trying to say is, can you go the other way? Instead of drawing everything into the cult and to the leader, because what's going here, transfer and out into the world, into where they are, and help them where they are, or do they have to come to the leader? That's what I'm trying to say. And so the people, like when I meet people that I think are great teachers, that's one of the features that shines for me. I want to teach it to other people, right, where they are, right. So those are some. I mean, I think there are deeper sort of ontological issues about being in the world and the good, but right at the level of giving people a set of criteria by which they can distinguish where they're liable to be in the world in a way that plugs them in, right, to what's primordial and orients them to what is ultimate. So things are properly proportioned in their being. So they flow with nature, as the Stoics would say, or the Taoists would say. But in terms of practical criteria, those are. So we were convergent. I was doing something very analogous because I was always ending. Because I would end the course and say, like, if you want to practice, but here's some things to look for. And so that's sort of where I'm at when I try to give people, and I talk to a lot of people now. A lot of students on the lectern ask me, "Oh, I'm looking around for a group. What should I look for?" I've been trying, and so I've been slowly sort of gathering more and more criteria. I hope that's helpful.
I mean, it is, because I think there is a context in which what you've named sits well, and my hope is that this also exemplifies it, which is, at the time that we're recording this hasn't happened yet. By the time you watch this, you will have been privy to the announcement of TIAMAT-X. And TIAMAT-X is a partnership between the Lectern and 5 to Midnight, the organization that I run, to do an extended training program, completely like practical, that takes you from tier 1 to tier 2, and then potentially tier 3 if one is healthy and capable, right? And for you to co-teach on that is a big piece of that invitation, and why I value your presence, because I think for me it's necessary that you are somebody who holds the dialogical sort of threads into these different fields with the necessary criteria. In a way, not because I want to drop that responsibility, I don't, but to have someone in the room who I can really meet this with and go, hey, how much more rigorous with this can we be?
Yeah.
Ellie was asking me this question of like, how do you see John's contribution to TIAMAT-X? What role does he play? And I said, and this is my opportunity to check it with you, right? That the anticipation is you wear multiple hats in the course of the program. Maybe one hat is a teacher, a researcher, participant, a friend, right? But also, what else might I be missing in that formulation? Because one of those things that I definitely hold, and I'm not, it's not an imposition, but I trust you to keep the work that I'm doing and the way I do that oriented to virtue as well. Not because you're a paragon of virtue,
no,
but because I don't want to be monological. The rest of the aspirants hold that same pole as well. But I would throw that question to you.
I welcome wearing many hats. I would probably also wear the hat of a philosopher and a scientist, a cognitive scientist, while I'm there. I am philia logos. I'm a lover of the logos, and I'm not a paragon of virtue. But I am a lover of the practices that, with and through other people and the world, presence the logos. And that is what I'll be looking for. I'll be looking for, is the logo showing up? Is it taking place? Is it taking shape? Does it have a life of its own? D.C. Schindler, and we didn't get a chance to get into this, but ontonormativity, the good, the Platonic good, which is not moral goodness in a very real sense, and Nietzsche missed this. The Platonic good is beyond standard good and evil. And before some people freak out about that, even God in the Bible says, I'm the source of good and evil. And he means both of those, darkness and light. But he says that what the Platonic good is, what is it that makes real? I mean, this is really interesting. And there's a lot going on there. But, and I don't think this is enough, but I think it's a good starting point. The really real is the for itselfness of things, that their inexhaustibility gives them. Remember when we talked about, we did absolute zero, and there's a pressure that remains from things, right? There's a for itselfness, because without that for itselfness, you can't get out of yourself, right? It is the only thing that draws you into, and like this idea that love is to recognize something other than yourself is real. But in order to recognize that something other than yourself is real, you need something other than yourself to be othering than yourself. But nevertheless, although this is one half, this is how realness is surprising to us, but yet, although it is for itself, it is also for us. We can enter into relation with it. And so it is somehow, the good is the holding together of the for itself and the for us. And right, this is again the phenomenological. Why is this real? Because it's for me. I can confirm. Why is that real? Oh, this falsified my beliefs. Oh wow, it shook me. It's surprising. It's both of those. That's the for itselfness, and when the logos is really present, and relevance realization becomes resonance realization, those two senses of realness are going like this. Right? You're getting a sense of other than me, and yet for me. For me, and yet other than me. You're getting that communal that Desmond talks about. And that's being in the world. The communal nature of beings is being in the world.
Which is not the same thing as saying that everything is for me, or the for itselfness is some kind of narcissistic self-confirmation.
No. It's not, what I mean.
It's actually stereoscopic.
Exactly. The point is, neither one of those if you isolate either one of those senses of real, you lose touch with reality. If I give you just unmitigated surprise, you're in horror and you're losing your grip on reality. If I give you just confirmation, you're in a Kafkaesque nightmare. Both of those are to lose touch with reality. This is Merleau-Ponty. When I'm touching, it's other than me. I'm always being touched. That is the quintessential of being, and it's communal. It's neither yours, it's not yours, and it's not just other than you. This is what we have so much, again, because of that ego machine. It's either me or not me. And being is both and neither, you and not you. That's a hard thing to get, because it is that which is more primordial than those. And you have to get to really taste and see that the Lord is good, is to really realize that, to have a sensed presence of that.
And there is a deep presupposition to that, which is one has to recognize oneself as real.
Well, what you have to do is you have to realize that. So like in when a practice I do, I try to withdraw all projections, all representations become realization, and you try to remove everything except what is intrinsic to the act of awareness. And what you get down to is a realizing while being realized, a realizing while being realized.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're pointing exactly at what I'm talking about, because I'm trying to address this issue where I dare say I can make this assumption. The degree of depersonalization and derealization in our contemporary culture is astonishingly high.
Yes, we're traumatized.
Yes, this sense of, if you're listening to this and you've ever felt this sensation of like, oh my God, like I'm not real to myself, right? Or other people are not real. I'm living in a kind of solipsism. I'm living in a kind of illusion. That's the fundamental presupposition that I'm trying to address. Both have to be real, so one can have contact with reality.
And that's right. And the degree to which you think everything is, that reality is a blank canvas that you project on, is the degree to which you actually lose touch with reality. I mean, the metaphor, I guess it's a metaphor. The image actually betrays itself, because if the canvas doesn't resist your projection just dissipates into nothingness. The canvas has to resist and have a shape and have a structure of its own in order for your projection to land. So even if you pay attention to the imagery of projection, it undermines itself. This is my fundamental problem with Kant and the nominalists. This is why I go on and on about it. And people, I don't care about all that abstract stuff. I get that you don't care about the abstract stuff. What you don't understand is the abstract stuff has insinuated it in to the very fiber of your experience. You don't emerge or live in a cognitive cultural vacuum. You are completely insinuated by and into things. And part of ascesis, of spiritual practice, is to, as you said, it's to cut, to do a kind of dissociation so you can reweave things in a way that is true to reality.
And a deep part of that truth is the inherent uncontrollability of reality, which is its unknownness.
Yes.
And I think there is,
that's resonant.
And sorry, just to finish up that point also, it's the unknownness of oneself. Oh my God, I had no idea I've been doing this the entire time.
This is the Psalms, deep calls to deep. That's resonance realization. That's when relevance realization becomes resonance realization. It's like, and Hartman Rosa says the uncontrollability of the world is essential to resonance. And resonance are the moments you live for. And I literally mean that, by the way, right? Not you live from, but you live for, right? And so you get that. But as you said, if it was just that, you would go, and there would be horror. But what you find is the uncontrollability of the world is met by something that you egoically don't control, that emerges in response and resonates. It's in the deep calling to deep, and the deep calling to deep. Those are the moments of realness. Pay attention to when things seemed the most real and what's really going on in your experience. That's to do phenomenology, and pay attention to how different it is, radically different from the picture we have been all enculturated to carry around. I'm sorry, I keep saying the same thing. In some ways, everything I teach is to try and I'm marking an allegiance. I'm not putting myself in the same class, but this is Edmund Husserl, Return to the Things, or Wittgenstein, stop talking and look, right? These philosophers constantly trying to wake us up from the way in which we are, as Wittgenstein says, a picture has us in its grip. We think we have a grip on the world, but a picture has us in its grip. And the practices you do, like loosening that grip, is painful for people. It's challenging. You need something that's well thought out, well structured, like there's a pedagogical program that's well scaffolded, that's well supervised. This is what you're offering.
And there is a big part of that is deeply embodied. So you just look at a few seconds ago, right? Like how animated you are. It's very difficult to do that sort of sitting down. I mean, you had named this experiment often, right? If you get people to hold on to a pole, like, they can't solve an insight problem. That when so much, because all of TIAMAT is undergirded by play. If you're not playing in the world, then and you're stuck like this, it's like you're holding on to your knees rather than holding on to a pole. But physically, it's the same thing. We have to be in the world fully embodied. And one can argue that, like, but even if I'm here, I'm also fully embodied. I'm like, yes, but I'm talking more about this term which I'm throwing around, I'm shipping it around, called psychophysical coherence, right? Where your inner experience matches your outer expression. That there is a clear channel, right? And that doesn't mean that it's complete impulsive reactivity into hedonism. I'm not a romantic, right? But that capacity to be able to live in the world completely, gesturally, fully, right, is what allows us, I think, to get access to the imaginal dimension, right? So that when you are putting on a different lens, it's not just abstract, it's in the body. Why I do live containers is exactly for this reason. When you're standing next to somebody and you can feel their breath on you, and you can reach out and you can touch them, there is something in that is deeply real, in that you're really touching them, but you're also really being touched.
Exactly.
That contact.
Exactly. That's why contact is our primary metaphor of relationship to reality.
Yeah. And that's, I think, what gives a kind of dimensionality. I was thinking about this this morning, where something that really, for lack of a better term, triggers me, like opens up all of my particular defensiveness or protectiveness, is when I get the sense that I'm not being taken as a whole person. I'm being seen as an aspect. Right? And I don't know what to do with that, aside from, and this is partially from growing up in a fairly traumatic household, but it opens a kind of desperation to be like, but look at all these other aspects, right, of myself. I'm trying to give people a fuller picture. I do that with all of my relationships as well. That when someone says, you read a lot, I go, but I also play a ton of video games. I also spend a lot of time on guitar, and then I read a book, and then I write something, right? And then I go grocery shopping. And I think it's very often nowadays where, part of it is, I'm sure, is mediated by technology. But, and I've named this to you, like, you're not just a teacher to me, right? Talk about projections. Before the Silk Road, before I joined you on the Silk Road, I was aware there was a part of me that saw you as my father, right? There's a transference psychodynamic piece that's happening there. And I felt so blessed to meet Jason, right? And I've named this to you as well, because to watch you interact with your son helped me to understand, John is not my father. And then what opens up for me and sort of the evolution of our relationship is, I see all the ways in which you're not that aspect which I'm naturally sort of like drawn towards, right? There's so much more color to your being in my life. And I try and offer that to people where, if you are not interested in understanding Charles Taylor or William Desmond, or voluntary necessity goes over your head, right? I urge you consider, like, if you're a parent, right, or you have a partner, right, and you spend a lot of time with them, are more and more dimensions of their being revealed to you.
Excellent.
And you might feel that as like, my child can say 4-syllable words at the age of 10 months, right? If you happen to have a child like that, right? And to really allow that illumination to strike you, deeply. Never mind the statistics of what the average, syllables will be by that age. I'm talking about the experience of what is ultimately the unfolding of reality embodied in an entity, in a living organism.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm talking about. That's the thing that if somebody comes out of a workshop and goes, well, my child is just magical to me every single day, I got my work is done.
Yeah, I mean, this is Wynn's masterpiece, renewing the senses. The point of all of this is a recovery of our sensibility that renews our senses, the way you just described. That's it. That's to experience the face of God in using his way of talking about it. It's adverbial. It's not to see a face in the sky. It's to the senses are renewed. So everything sings its name. Everything is right. Everything is phusis. Everything is springing forth from itself. Yeah. I mean, I have, because of practices, I have these experiences. Some of them are generative. Some of them are generated, I should say. Some of them are spontaneous. It gives me, I'm very confident, I'll never be enlightened or anything such. But I was talking to a friend of ours, we both know Varun, the other day about,
Yeah.
but you get enough in these practices that you can taste what it might have been like to be Socrates or Siddhartha or Jesus or Plotinus or Maximus. And when I was on the philosophical Silk Road, I could get deep tastes of people that are beyond me. Every one of them, all my interlocutors, including Jason, are beyond me in certain ways. I don't know what else makes a good life other than that, to tell you the truth. I mean, I get it. Obviously there are things that we need in order to be alive. I need food and I need shelter. I need medicine. But that beyonding, that's betweening, to use the title of our forthcoming book.
Yes.
That I don't know what else makes a life worth living other than that. That's the good again. The good is ultimately what makes life worth living. And it's to really realize reality in this comprehensive way we've been talking about. I think that's a good place to end, actually. And this has been a wonderful journey we've had together. This has been a wonderful journey. This has been excellent. I want to thank you for it. I'm going to consult this video multiple times as I do continuing this work on the world tree of the true, the good, and the beautiful. It's been very helpful. As always, I'll give you the final word.
I'm still with that question of, is there... I don't even know how to phrase this question, but what makes a better life than that? And somewhat playfully, my answer is no thing.
Yeah. That's good.
So thank you all, everybody. Likewise, it's been an amazing set of 3 conversations. And of course, we talk all the time. But I've missed this. I've missed philosophizing with you. And Aristotle has very often said, just talk about virtue.
Yeah.
Talk about virtue.
Yeah.
And I love doing this with you. I look forward to doing this with you more on TIAMAT-X. If you are interested, and we are primarily focusing on practice, please consider. I would like to meet more persons deeply. So thank you all, everybody.
Thank you.